Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, this is Andrew, and welcome back to Overwatch. I got about 10 minutes of footage and a number of points to talk about how to improve at Zarya, the Russian tank lady, who is actually based off of a real-life Blizzard employee. Check this out, guys. Pretty neat stuff, but yeah, without further ado, let's get right into this. The format's going to be similar to my other How to Get Better videos. If you haven't seen them, check them out up here in the card section in the upper right-hand corner. Anyways, without further ado, let's get right into it. And the first sort of tip is going to be about the barriers that Zarya can set up. She can set up one for herself and set up one for her teammates. Currently, they both last for 2 seconds each, and they both have 200 HP maximum as far as damage they can block. Now, they will grant invulnerability, so you won't get frozen, stunned, or what have you. But they do also have the nice benefit of converting damage you take to damage you do. Now, this is for both of the shields, both of the barriers, so you can rack up an easy 100 charge on your laser beam. A quick note here, though, is that it seems that most sources are unclear as far as the exchange rate. A lot of people are saying you get 3 charge on your shield for every 5 damage you take. That is actually incorrect. I did some testing on my own in a server, and it seems as though the conversion rate is more 4 damage done to the barrier, you output 1 charge to your gun. However, I don't want to get too much into the numbers here. I want to talk about proper use of your barriers because they only last for 2 seconds. Now, a common mistake I'm seeing with a lot of Zarya players, at least the new ones, is that they use the barriers proactively instead of reactively. What I mean by that is they basically set the barriers before going into battle and basically miss out on the precious 2 seconds they have with the barrier on. So what you want to do, what I would suggest, is to go in without the barrier, let the enemies do damage to your shield, right, the blue health that regenerates, and turn on your barrier once you start taking some damage. That way, it's a lot harder for your enemy to react to the barrier, as opposed to sort of coming with the barrier on, your enemy seeing it already without firing at you, and they just kind of know to ignore you until it's down again. The same kind of logic applies to allies, but it's a bit harder to pull off, especially in pubs. And this leads to tip 2. Tip 2 is, as Zarya, you gotta be the queen or king, whatever it is, of situational awareness. You have to be so aware of your allies, so aware of your enemies, and kind of watch where your allies are doing. This is probably a lot easier if you're playing with friends, you guys can communicate verbally, but in general, just keep an eye on for your allies. If you see a Winston jumping in or a Genji leaping in with his Dragon Blade or Reaper ulting, be sure to cast that barrier on them. It does have considerable range, so you can go out and touch them even if they're kind of far deep in there. So be sure to be super cautious of stacking both your barrier and your allies' barrier. That way you can max out at the 100 energy that you should be getting. Now remember what I said earlier, be sure to use the barriers at the right time. You don't want to cast them too early and then the enemies will kind of see the barrier in time and just not attack it. Just go ahead and try to cast it on allies that are either already taking damage or are about to take damage within the next split second. Now don't wait too long, don't wait too late, but all that comes in practice with Zarya. Just pure game time, you'll kind of get a sense for when to cast your barrier. Of course, don't forget your support heroes are also in the back line who are getting flanked. You know, that's a great way to rack up easy points. If you have a Mercy healing you and a Reaper is on her ass, just be sure to protect her and use barrier if you can. Now, a little mini tip here on the barrier before we move on to the next point is that they are fantastic against burst damage. In fact, I would say they're probably the most effective against burst damage. The way they work, and this applies to both the projected and the self barrier, is that they will take infinite amount of damage if it's in a burst. So, for example, yes, they only have 200 HP, but if a Junkrat tire comes at you that does 600 damage, it will negate all 600 damage. It won't actually bleed into your actual health pool. Sort of a nice handy tip if you want to use a burst damage ultimate like D.Va's self-destruct to get some easy charge on your particle cannon. Now, the next tip I want to talk about would be using your Graviton Surge effectively. That is her ultimate, the nice big blank hole thing that will suck enemies together for a total of 4 seconds. Absolutely amazing ability, but I see a lot of Zaryas misuse it. Now, how to use it effectively is sort of a couple different steps. So first and foremost, you want to make sure you have a decent amount of charge in your particle cannon. The next thing you want to make sure is that you have full ammo in your gun. A lot of times I make the mistake of going into an ultimate only like 25 rounds left in the magazine, and then I have to reload halfway through, and given that the Graviton Surge only lasts for 4 seconds, that really cuts down on the amount of damage you can dish out. So be aware of your ammo count. Now the next thing about the Graviton Surge is that it depends a lot on your teammates. If you have a Hanzo, if you have a Mei, any sort of other additional AoE ability, Hanzo's great by the way, Graviton Surge is amazing with those abilities stacked upon each other. The usefulness is multiplied by, I don't even know, the 100-fold. It's just amazing. Now, the tricky part is coordinating with your team to pull off such a combo. Oftentimes, you know, in pubs, there's not that much communication, so it's just like everyone plays in silence. So a lot of times you'll see a Hanzo waste his ultimate when, you know, you have your Zarya ultimate ready to go, and it would have been 10 times better if you guys coordinated, but it just doesn't work out. A nice little way around this is to listen to your allies' audio cues. Now, I'm sure you guys know this already, but every hero, when they use an ultimate, they will say something like a little speech or a little splurb before they use their ultimate. Try to pay attention to those, especially with your allies, and just try your best to time it with their ultimates. Obviously, this isn't optimal. You always want to communicate with your teammates when coordinating attacks like this, but you know, if you have to work in silence, as pubs often are, you actually at least have this sort of backup plan. No matter how you coordinate with your team, or if you're able to coordinate with your team, or what have you, the general rule to stick by is to make sure your allies are somewhat close to you when you pull off a Graviton Surge. The worst feeling in the world is to pull off this amazing, you know, 6-man ultimate and then no one to follow up damage with. The cool little thing about the Graviton Surge is that it will actually also work on rip tires. That's right guys, you heard me right, it will suck and hold in rip tires. It's pretty insane. I'll show you guys it happening here in an actual game, but then I actually went ahead and tested it with Remsy. It's pretty insane. However, I would say it's probably not too practical, because timing, you know, the Graviton Surge next to a running rip tire that's moving really quickly is pretty difficult to do. But, you know, is it awesome? Hell yes. Does it work? Debatable, but either way, it is an amazingly satisfying thing to pull off. The last thing I want to talk about as Zarya is to really look out for shields, and I'm talking about Reinhardt shields specifically, maybe Winston's to a certain extent, but really Reinhardt's shield, because his shield will basically cancel you out. If you're on a 100 charge beam and you're hitting a Reinhardt shield that has 200 HP, it's going to take you a while to get through that shield, and your power decreases all the while you're sort of hammering away. So shields to me are one of Zarya's biggest counters. Not only does it sort of negate your momentum with the energy charge on your particle cannon, it also negates any sort of combo you can pull off with the Graviton Surge. Reinhardt can set up a shield when he's being stunned by your ultimate, and that will protect him from a lot of damage. That is, unless you're able to take out his shield beforehand, or if you have a Hanzo whose Dragon Strike goes through shields. When you're going up against a Reinhardt as Zarya, you want to be super conscious of that Reinhardt shield, just because it will really mess up your combo if you aren't careful. So be sure to have allies like Pharah who can fly over the shield, or Hanzo is probably the best one because they'll go through shields. Reaper or Tracer who can get behind the shield really quickly and just do some serious burst damage. You know, those sort of things you kind of have to look out for when you're playing Zarya against a Reinhardt. Anyways guys, that's just about it for today. Those are my tips on how to improve at Zarya. She is becoming probably my favorite tank in all of Overwatch, and if there's one thing that I would want you guys to take away from this video, is that Zarya depends so much on situational awareness. Like, you have to keep an eye out for your teammates, keep an eye out for your enemies, know where your enemies are, where your allies are, and make sure you are in a good positioning to pull off your abilities, because her abilities depend a lot on proper timing and her allies. Anyways guys, that's just about it for today. If you guys got any sort of special requests for the next hero that you guys want me to do, let me know down in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one.